They say hunger sharpens the spirit, that an empty stomach becomes a vessel where whispers from another world may settle. In the forgotten corners of history where parchment has withered and ink has bled into silence, there lingers a strange belief that fasting was not merely a ritual of health or discipline, but a weapon, an invisible shield raised against forces unseen. Imagine, for a moment, a time when darkness was not metaphorical but tangible, when every shadow along a crumbling stone wall could be more than the absence of light, when villagers swore the night had teeth. What could a man do against such a presence, except deny his own body the very sustenance that tethered him to this world? The chronicles that survive, half true, half phantom, speak of figures who walked gaunt and hollow-eyed into the depths of the earth, believing that by starving the flesh, they starved the shadows feeding upon them. Some called it a rite, others a curse. But the lines blur, and what emerges from the mist of centuries is not clarity, but an eerie pattern. Again and again, across different lands and empires, we find traces of people deliberately surrendering to hunger in exchange for something they could not name aloud. There is an account, barely legible in a Venetian codex now darkened with age, of a scholar who entered the forests of Illyria, convinced that an unseen parasite of the spirit had latched upon him. For 7 nights he consumed nothing but bitter water from a stone basin. When hunters later discovered the site, they found no trace of his body, only his shoes set neatly by the water's edge, as though the man had slipped into a threshold that required no flesh to pass. Picture that image. The shoes, still carrying the creases of the man's feet, abandoned like relics, while the forest pressed in heavy and eternal. Was he consumed by fever, by madness, or by something more patient than time itself? The codex offers no answer, only a faded sketch of a thin spectral figure with ribs like harp strings, annotated with the words, "He starved the parasite." This is the unsettling hook, the beginning of a trail that leads deeper into the cavern of human fear. What if fasting, as the ancients practiced it, was not simply a cleansing of body, but a calculated act of defense against presences we cannot see but only feel? The body, stripped of strength, became transparent, like glass. And through that glass, the unseen could not cling. Yet in such stories, there is always a price. Hunger distorts vision. The mind unmoors from the familiar world. Those who fasted too long often returned not with salvation, but with a gaze fixed on horizons no one else could perceive. Villagers remembered them not as saints, but as wanderers marked by silence, whose very presence drew shivers even in summer heat. So we ask, were these rituals a primitive superstition, or the fragment of some lost science of the soul? If we peel back the gilded layers of history, if we listen closely enough to the echoes left in ruined amphorae, forgotten shrines, and the faint lines of faded manuscripts, a question emerges like a shadow against the torchlight. What did the ancients truly fear, hunger itself, or what followed in its absence? And this is where our journey begins. Not with answers, but with an emptiness that asks to be filled. And still the tale deepens when we descend into the labyrinth of records left by civilizations whose names are half remembered. On cracked tablets and brittle scrolls, fasting appears not as an act of humility, but as a strategy of survival. One Sumerian fragment, translated with hesitation by modern scholars, hints at a ritual called the hollowing of the vessel. Its glyphs are uneven, as if the scribe's hand trembled, but the words remain clear enough. Empty the flesh, for the shadow feeds on fullness. Such a phrase does not sing of religion or health. It speaks of a bargain: starve the body so that the unseen has nothing left to claim. Consider the city of your where famine once swept like a black wind through its courtyards. Among the clay brick ruins, archaeologists uncovered a peculiar chamber. No inscriptions of kings, no treasures, only bowls placed upside down in perfect circles, surrounding a central pit. Inside that pit they found nothing, only a residue of ash that resisted all attempts at identification. To the untrained eye, it was merely the dust of time, but to those who study the patterns of ritual, the message was unmistakable. This was a place where people gathered not to feast, but to starve together. And in the silence of their hunger, they believed they were strangling something darker than famine itself. Imagine the scene: a dozen figures seated around the pit, their bodies growing frail, their minds sharpened like blades against the edge of emptiness. As days turned into nights, visions must have come. One by one they would have seen shapes flicker in the dim torchlight, not carved on stone, not painted on walls, but hovering at the corner of perception. Were these hallucinations of starvation, or the very parasites they feared to name? The bowls turned upside down, whisper of denial. Food rejected, sustenance inverted, a deliberate refusal of life's abundance. Across the sea, in early Hellenic accounts, we hear echoes of the same motif. A philosopher named Menandros, whose works are mostly lost, wrote cryptically of guarding the threshold through hunger. In one fragment, preserved by his students, he describes a man who fasted for 30 days, claiming afterward that he no longer carried the weight of shadows upon his back. Menandros notes with unease that the man's shadow itself was faint, diminished, as though reluctant to cling to him. Here we encounter not metaphor, but a disturbing suggestion. Fasting could loosen even the most ordinary tether between a man and his shade. There is, too, the haunting case recorded in the mountain villages of Anatolia. The elders spoke of a woman who, afflicted by nightly visitations, stopped eating entirely. Neighbors claimed her footsteps grew so light they left no impression in the dust. One night, she faded. In her dwelling they found her garments folded upon her bed, but the bed itself bore no indentation, as if her body had ceased to press against the fabric of the world. The motif repeats. Fasting as a dissolution, a retreat from material weight, leaving only suggestion, absence, residue. For the ancients, it was a line drawn in silence. If you make yourself hollow, then nothing can inhabit you. But such hollowness carried danger. The same sources whisper that those who embraced emptiness too long became wanderers in their own skin, unable to return fully to the banquet of life. They lingered at thresholds, speaking in riddles, eyes reflecting landscapes unseen. And always, there is the lingering unease in the records. Were these wanderers free, or were they marked forever by what they had tried to escape? Thus, the practice spreads across cultures, carrying with it the same unspoken dread. Sumerians, Greeks, Anatolians, all separated by distance, yet united by an idea too strange to be coincidence. Why starve, unless one believed something far more terrifying than hunger itself waited at the table of the well-fed? Welcome to my channel. As always, I hope you're well. The human body can go 30 days without food, but how does it go 40 days? You might think that a plan of total fasting is a recipe for disaster, but there are accounts of people surviving 40 days without food and emerging healthier than before. We have heard of a few such individuals, including a man from South Africa who went 72 days without eating and a woman from the UK who went 38 days. But these cases are more the exception than the rule. So let us continue with this series. Let's look at some more myths and facts about fasting. As we move deeper into this labyrinth of half-truths, a chilling pattern emerges. Fasting was not only personal, but communal, a defense enacted by entire villages when they believed something unseen had rooted itself among them. The Roman historian Aulus Serenus, seldom quoted, wrote of a hill settlement in Thrace where, during an outbreak of what he called the nightly suffocation, the elders ordered all food to be burned and the populace to endure 40 days of emptiness. Serenus describes the village as a place where smoke curled from hearths yet no bread was baked, where streets echoed with hollow steps. At the end of the 40 days, he writes, the disturbances ceased, but so did the sound of youthful laughter, as though the very soul of the community had been bled into silence. Centuries later, Byzantine chroniclers recorded a practice they named kenosis, the emptying of fear. Households would seal their granaries and starve together during certain eclipses, believing that the veil between worlds thinned when the sun was devoured by shadow. The act of hunger was thought to make them invisible to whatever prowled in the darkness, and while modern scholars dismiss these rites as superstition, one detail continues to gnaw at the imagination. The chroniclers noted that, afterward, villagers often claimed they could no longer recall the faces of those who had disappeared during the eclipse. Memory itself was eroded, as if starvation had cleansed not only the body, but the very record of who once stood beside them. We find another unsettling account in the deserts of Persia. Travelers wrote of a sect who lived in caverns carved into salt cliffs. These hermits believed that every meal was an invitation for spirits to enter, so they consumed only dust-mixed water, letting the salt corrode their tongues. Witnesses said their eyes gleamed unnaturally, reflecting light even in darkness, and when these hermits departed or perhaps transformed, their forms seemed to dissolve quickly into powder, leaving only faint outlines on the cavern floor. Were these simply ravages of malnutrition and climate, or evidence that the body, made hollow, could dissolve back into the earth with unnatural speed? But perhaps the most haunting thread comes from the northern forests of Scythia, where nomads spoke of a ritual known as the fading banquet. At dusk, they would lay out plates of food in a circle, fragrant and steaming, only to sit in silence and watch the dishes grow cold. No hand touched the meal, no mouth broke the fast. The belief was that unseen presences fed upon the aromas, and only by offering the scent, not the substance, could the tribe remain safe. Once the steam vanished into the air, the food was buried untouched, sacrificed not to gods, but to something unacknowledged. Imagine the tableau: steaming bowls, hungry faces, the entire tribe staring as warmth lifted into the night sky, waiting for an unseen guest to eat their share. These scenes share an atmosphere heavy with dread and symbolism. Food denied, shadows lengthened, hunger not as weakness but as a calculated erasure of presence. Yet for all these efforts, for all the hollowing and the burning and the burial of meals, the outcome remained ambiguous. Did these rites save lives, or did they simply deepen the psychological abyss of those who practiced them? The most provocative question lingers like ash in the air. What invisible banquet were they so desperately trying not to serve? So friends, do you know any such incidents of fasting, or do you yourself practice fasting? Do share your stories. Until next time, stay well. By now the pattern no longer feels like scattered folklore. It begins to resemble a tapestry, woven from threads of fear and sacrifice. Yet to stare too long at this tapestry is to feel one's own thoughts unravel. For the ancients, hunger was not only a shield, but also a doorway, and once that doorway opened, not all who crossed returned intact. Take for instance, the chilling chronicle from the highlands of Etruria. A nobleman named Larthvelthera is said to have locked himself within a stone chamber after claiming a weight of breath clung to him in the night. For 40 days he accepted no food, only water gathered from morning dew. His servants, forbidden to approach, left bowls at the threshold and retreated. On the final day, when the door was unsealed, Velthora stood alive but unmoored. His eyes reflected nothing, as though the world no longer impressed itself upon him. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were riddles describing vast corridors beneath the earth, lined with doors that opened onto silence. He endured another year, wandering his estate with bare feet, before he faded one winter's night. Only his walking staff remained, wedged upright in the frozen soil, as if planted like a marker where he had slipped away from sight. Another tale comes from the markets of Carthage, where a group of merchants, tormented by what they called the eyes in the smoke, fasted together beneath a canopy of black cloth. Witnesses claimed that on the seventh day, the merchants' voices shifted, layered with echoes, as though more than one being spoke through their lips. When the fast was broken, their voices returned to normal, but each man wore an identical scar across the chest, faint as a brushstroke. Physicians dismissed it as coincidence. Yet in Carthaginian lore, scars without wound were proof of contact, marks left by presences that brushed too close, but not all accounts speak of fading or scars. Some hint at transformation. In the marshlands of Gaul, there is a tale of a woman called Moria, who starved herself to free her village from recurring visions. She claimed that by hollowing her body, she would become a vessel strong enough to trap what haunted them. Days passed, and she grew gaunt, her frame swaying like a candle in wind. On the 12th night, villagers swore they saw a shimmer, a distortion around her figure, as though heat rippled through the air, though no fire burned. Afterward, the visions ceased. But Moria did not rejoin her people. She wandered the marsh, eyes fixed on horizons unseen, murmuring to companions no one else perceived. Even in her absence, her legacy endured. Villagers refused to eat during the dark of the moon, fearing to break whatever barrier she had woven with her hunger. In these stories, we glimpse the dangerous paradox. Fasting shielded them from the unseen, but it also tore at the seams of perception. Hunger sharpened the mind until it sliced through the veil of ordinary life, revealing corridors, voices, distortions, things better left veiled. And once seen, such visions could not be unseen. Perhaps this is why so many accounts speak not only of defense, but of exile. Those who fasted too long became strangers in their own villages, tolerated but avoided. Their eyes no longer mirrored the common world. Their shadows, when they appeared at all, seemed thinner, reluctant, as though clinging to a body that no longer belonged entirely here. Archaeologists in Anatolia recently uncovered a curious artifact, a terracotta mask with hollow cheeks and a mouth sealed shut, found in a pit beside vessels of untouched grain. Was it a symbol of the starver, the one who silences hunger in order to silence the unseen? Or was it an effigy of those who passed too far, whose hollowness became permanent? The question deepens, and with it, the unease. Did these rituals truly shield their practitioners? Or did they invite a different fate, one where the body was spared but the mind surrendered? To hollow oneself is to gamble with identity itself. For some, emptiness was protection. For others, it was a point of no return. And so the stories fracture like broken glass. Shoes without owners, staffs planted in frozen ground, voices doubled, scars without wounds, faces fading from memory. They are fragments, each one incomplete. Yet together they whisper of a reality darker than hunger. A reality the ancients may have glimpsed but could never endure. What, then, are we to make of this tapestry of hunger and shadow? The ancients left behind no single doctrine, no clear manual to decipher, only fragments. Shoes without a walker, garments folded on untouched beds, bowls placed upside down, staffs planted where a man once stood. Each artifact whispers not of sustenance, but of emptiness, an emptiness cultivated with purpose. To them, fasting was not deprivation, it was resistance, it was erasure. By hollowing the vessel, they believed they denied passage to something darker than famine itself. Yet every tale carries the same uneasy undertone. Protection was never free. Those who starved away the shadows often returned fractured, their minds no longer tethered to the banquet of ordinary life. They survived, yes, but survival was not wholeness. They were as empty as the bowls they had turned upside down, as silent as the garments they had folded and left behind. I have walked among the ruins of those ancient meals, traced the patterns of their lives with my fingertips, and found this hunger everywhere. It is in the cornerstone of the temple, in the raised truck of the boat, in the bones of the last bird that flew too close to the sun, and always it is there in the quiet corners of the mind, a vastness that swallows all but the sharpest memories. Did they not know what they were doing when they turned their backs on bread and wine? Or did they know and do it anyway? And here I am, tracing their steps through an empty world, hoping to find an answer in the dust, but the only voice that answers me is the wind that whispers through the ruins, a song as old as the stars. For who hungers and who feasts, who starves and who is full, who walks in darkness and who dances in the light, who reaches for the sun and who cowers from its touch. We are all of these, all at once and all in turn. The question is not what we are, but what we will become. The choice is written in the patterns of our lives, in the echoes of our hungers. It is written in the very silence of the stars. Will we starve the shadows, or will we feast? Will we turn our backs on the hunger, or will we let it consume us? Or to be whole again, to feel the sun on skin and sand on toes, to taste the sweetness of grapes and the laughter of friends around a table, to be full and yet not break. That is the hunger that I have.